And hello, movie lovers, and welcome to the show. So tonight, actually, I have a very special guest with me. I have Heidi, and we're going to be reviewing Friday the 13th, the 1980s original movie of Friday the 13th. So with further ado, let's go on ahead. Let's head to Camp Crystal Lake, and hopefully we'll survive the night in Camp Crystal Lake without somebody trying to kill us. Here we go. And hey, Heidi, how are you?
Good. How are you? I'm glad to be
I'm
back.
doing great. It's always a great time to be able to do another review with you, and this time to talk about Friday the 13th, the original one. We actually did the documentary for Kane Harder, so now we're back again to do this one. So I'm very excited to be able to do this.
I am too. I did a lot of research after the movie and found out a lot of cool facts. So it's pretty interesting.
It definitely is. And, this is actually one of those movies that people get confused with as well, because some people are like, well, it was Jason Voorhees in the first one. No, it was his mother before for this, but we'll get to that later. But, I really have to say I really enjoyed this, rewatching this after so many years.
So Betsy Palmer played Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother. And the vibe that you get from her when she first appears, she seems like she's nurturing. And Alice Hardy runs to her for help. And you expect, Pamela to, she shows the signs of like she's trying to give condolence and, concern and just, be very nurturing. And then all of a sudden she had that twist. And it's like,
Right. Because all of a sudden she just switches like a light bulb all of a sudden, where it's like, okay, just well, tell me, honey, what's going on? Next thing you know, she goes, show me. She goes into the cabin and everything. Then she explains the backstory of Jason and the counselors and everything else. And then it goes into the fact, well, they would have stayed had their would be able to put basically keep an eye on him. This wouldn't have happened. And then it goes into the backstory of the fact that this is his mother. So I really like that whole entire dynamic where this innocent girl is trying to look for his refuge in this woman that she doesn't even know, and hoping that she would actually get rescued from her. So I definitely like that aspect to it, like towards the end of it.
I do too.
But yeah.
And believe it or not, like Friday the 13th's backstory is deep. Like, yes, it's a slasher movie. Yes, it's 1980s film where, the cinematography by Barry Abrams did the cinematography on it. So you got that 1980s film versus the filming that we do presently. But what's crazy about the backstory is, so Jason Voorhees as a little kid, what was he, 9? I think 9 years old when he had drowned in Camp Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
And the reason he drowned was because the camp counselors were doing fornication.
Well, let's get into a little bit of the plot and everything too, because we're gonna go through this scene by scene as well too. But yeah, like you said though, in a brief prologue set in 1958, two summer camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake named Barry Jackson and Claudette Hayes sneak away from the campfire, singing along to have sex before they completely undress. An unseen assailant sneaks into the room. Barry and Claudette notices her. Barry is trying to convince the assailant that they weren't doing anything. Unconvinced, the assailant stabs Barry in the guts, chases down Claudette, and slashes her throat. So the opening scene alone is really phenomenal because you don't even see the killer. It's just like this first-person view kind of angle of it. And this is actually not the first time that something like that happened, because it even happened in Halloween, where it was like a first-person view, Michael staring out in the yards and stuff like that. But it's just something horrifying to see these counselors wind up dying, because of the fact that they were trying to fool around, and then and then you wind up seeing that scene. But what did you think of the opening?
Um, it was interesting because, first of all, back in the 80s, you see, which one was it? Alice who was hitchhiking, or Annie?
Annie. Annie
Annie.
was hitchhiking.
Was hitchhiking to meet up with her friends, and she got into a truck with a trucker. No thoughts, just got in, didn't even worry about safety back then. You can't be doing that today. So, just that alone of how different it was from back then till now is kind of crazy. And I mean, stuff happened back then, but not like it does now.
No, definitely not. I would not get into the no truck with no trucker or anything like that either, to be honest with you, because you don't know this person from Adam. And then Annie is just an innocent person as well. She's just trying to get over to the Camp Crystal Lake so that way she can do her cooking, you know? But the opening scene alone is actually pretty crazy as well, though.
Right.
With
And let's talk about Camp Crystal Lake. If that's a real place. Like, now obviously it's not really called Camp Crystal Lake, but it's located in Hardwick, New Jersey, and its real name is Camp Nobi Bosco.
Mhm.
And it's a real place. But it is closed to the public, but it does allow touring. So
Okay.
I thought that was pretty cool. Just because of how far. If you would have asked me like last year, would I go there? I'd probably tell you hell no. But how far that I've come along, like with the whole Friday the 13th and Kane Hodder and being top 5 in the contest, I'd go. I definitely feel like I have to go there now just to visit and
Right.
take a tour.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly though, if I did get there, I don't know how I'd feel.
Might be a little uneasy because of the things that we've learned from the movie itself, right?
Right.
Or
But at the
watched.
same time, being in the entertainment business, I do know, that it is all made up, but it's still just as watching this as a young adult and young teen back then, I might still have a little bit of scars stuck there.
Gotcha. But yeah, but then you actually have the film that moves forward to the present Friday, June 13th. A young woman named Annie Phillips enters the small diner and asks for directions to Camp Crystal Lake. Much to the shock of the other patrons and staff, Enos, a friendly truck driver from the diner, agrees to give Annie a lift to the Crossroads Cemetery, which is halfway to the camp. My thing was this, okay? So why didn't she just get a ride all the way to the camp? Why, and I understand this is a small town. I understand people don't want to go even near this place because of what happened, the events that happened. But at the same time, you're letting this innocent woman who is an innocent bystander just to get murdered. If you know all this stuff is happening, but also too, the guy is also telling her, "Hey, you need to turn around. You don't need to even be bothering with this place." So I guess he's like, "Well, she's on her own. If that's the case, you know." But at the same time, you can't help but feel scared for Annie, though, because she doesn't know anybody. She's in a town that she doesn't know. She's not self aware of anything. All she's hearing is these rumors. But I also like how the camera angle is. It has like documentary kind of feel to it at
It
first,
does.
where we're actually, yeah, because that was actually on a regular Polaroid or something like that. I forgot the name of the film that they actually put it on, but I really like that because it makes us feel like that we're the passenger going along for this ride with her. So we feel that much more scared for her.
Right. It's just like you're right there. But it didn't make sense to me why she wouldn't, if she's going with her friends and it's a small town, why wouldn't she just ride with her friends? So, like you said, but for some reason,
But
she decided to go into a diner and ask a bunch of strangers.
my thing was this: I don't think anybody knew her because remember, whenever they're setting up, like, okay, so is everybody here? Yeah, all except that one girl, Annie. She hasn't come in yet. So I'm thinking that they don't know each other. So therefore, that's
Okay.
why. That,
Yeah, maybe Annie was kind of new to the group.
Because that's what I'm assuming, because it seems like all the group knows each other, all except they don't know Annie, who was just going to be the cook. Because remember, they're like, well, who did that? So everybody's here. Yeah, all except that one girl, Annie. I don't know where she's at. She hasn't arrived yet.
So
So that was what.
one thing, other than like obviously Kane wasn't in the first Jason yet. It was Pamela, his played by Betsy. But the thing is when this first Friday the 13th came out, there really wasn't an all-star cast. Nobody was anybody big. Now, yes, Kevin Bacon was in there, but he wasn't big at the time that he was in this.
No, because I forgot, when did Footloose come out at that time, though, right? It came out in the 80s, but it wasn't where
I
it
want
was
to
that established.
I want to say 87.
84. So 4 years
84?
later. Yep.
Okay.
4 years later, Footloose comes out. So it's just crazy to think about the fact that he's not even a household name yet. He's an unknown. So you have some unknown people that moved on to do some good, nice work in Hollywood.
Right. Absolutely.
But, I like the fact that they started off with the mother and not with Jason, because I think that was a neat way to actually get Jason's revenge on the people that killed his mother now. Because now you don't have just one person seeking revenge. Now you also have the son seeking the revenge
of his mother. Yes. And it's funny because it tells the story perfectly. And if you notice, most of the victims are more of the sexually active ones, versus at the time, I don't think Alice was very sexually active. She was more of the loner. All of them were kind of partnered up in a way.
Right.
And so, with that being said, because of the negligence of Jason being drowned in the lake, because of the counselors, not paying attention because they were having sex, it's almost like a revenge. It's almost like a revenge love story.
It definitely is. It's about a mother and son relationship and the bond that they have, the love of a mother, trying to seek revenge on the people that did him wrong, which is the camp counselors that had sex during the time that he drowned.
Right. And then the twist is his revenge on his mother's death. I mean, it's a sick bonding love story. Relationships and good, not just intimate relationships, but relationship with mother and son and all that.
Exactly. Then you also have this other scene, though, too. You have Annie leaving the diner. They're interrupted by Crazy Ralph asking, "You're going to Camp Blood? Ain't ya?" Enos and Annie ignores him. Ralph starts talking to Annie, warning her of the danger, but they ignore Ralph and keep going. Then Annie and Enos reach the truck during their drive, like we mentioned. He warns her about the dark, bloody history of Camp Blood and insists that she quit immediately, informing her of a boy drowning in 1957, the two murders, and serial arson as reasons why the camp is considered cursed. Annie ignores the suspicion and continues her hike to the camp when dropped off at the cemetery. And then you have that one scene where now it goes into Ned, Robstein, Jack Burrell, and Marcy Standler. And Jack and Marcy are a couple, and Ned is most likely jealous of them. They are all headed to Camp Crystal Lake to work as counselors. So I like how they established the new, this other cast now. We actually met Annie. She's the first character that we get introduced to. Then we get into this other thing where we're introduced to Kevin Bacon. We're introduced to these other characters. And we're also, once again, feeling like that we are a long part of that ride, the way that it sets up, which makes us be more invested in these characters later on when they get killed off. Because we're wondering who's going to be the final person that winds up surviving this whole entire tragic thing that happens. So I thought the initial setup was really good. Some people will say, well, maybe it's like a little bit paint by the numbers, but for me, I thought it was a great setup for characterization to understand these characters.
The fact that the way the slasher setup is kind of like paint by numbers, but like you said, the characters was what tells the story. And I think they did a great job by it.
Even the painting. Let me just tell you this, okay? So I watched a little bit of the Netflix series of the movies that made us, and it was actually the Friday the 13th one. Now, they didn't have enough budget at the time to finish off the bathroom or anything. So there was like only one working commode. The rest of it was not even finished or completed. So I like how the fact that they used that as a way, because it's actually perfect. You don't need it finished because it's supposed to be a condemned place that something
Mhm.
tragic happened. So I'm glad that they ran out of budget to where they couldn't do anything with it. Then also too, they also painted the doors red and everything too. Everything was red in this to amplificate the bloodiness of what this camp is.
And
So I thought they,
to
yeah,
symbolize it.
exactly. But yeah, I thought that was a great way of actually setting it up, and also too, the characters are really something that you're rooting for. And then Alice runs to Bill Brown, who's by the lake, and talks to him. Alice runs back towards the main cabins, and then Annie hitches to the camp. A driver appears, and Annie asks for a ride. As Annie talks to the driver is suspiciously quiet. But as the driver speeds up past the entrance to the camp, Annie starts to panic and jumps out. The driver chases the injured girl in the woods, catching her and slitting her throat. So, what did you think of that scene? For me, seeing in that first person view and you know that this person's quiet, that's not a good sign.
Not at all, especially when they start speeding up. And it made me wonder, like, who exact, because they don't show you the driver's face. It's kind of, you just know it's the driver and everything. But when she jumped out, she continued to carry her stuff. If that would have been me, I would have just dropped my stuff. I would have went and found like a pile of leaves or somewhere and hid in a bush somewhere. Instead, she tried to run,
She was
carrying
determined
her
to get
stuff.
that damn job. I'm just gonna tell you, she was determined to get that cooking job, even if it was gonna kill her, too. Because that has she had a huge backpack on her. It's one of those
She
hiking
did.
backpacks, and that's just gonna slow her down. So I didn't understand why she even had that on to begin with, either, because I would have just lost that thing and just kept on running. But she was determined to be a cook for that camp. I can tell you that.
Honestly, like, I would have thrown it in the opposite direction and ran the other way. So that way, whoever was chasing me would see it in the opposite direction and think I was going that way. But no, she decided to carry it with her, slow her down, stumble with her ankle, with her little tuck and roll out of the vehicle. And how did they, like, she could see the lake. She wasn't far from the lake. So how did they not hear her scream?
I think it goes by how far they were, depending on where they were in the different locations. Don't forget, you also have different layers of this camp that's huge. You
Mm-hmm.
have the archery. You also have the bathrooms. The bathrooms also seem further away, though, too, from the other cabins. And
Right.
so it's a little bit harder to actually, in my opinion, to hear somebody screaming when basically you're so miles out, though, too, depending on where you are in the camp.
Yeah, and it also depends whether or not she was I don't know if you want to call it upstream at a lake, but depending on what angle she's standing at too. But it was confusing to me. It was like, you'd think that they would have heard that, because the one
Exactly.
girl says, "I think I see something moving over there," but then she was like, "Nope, never mind."
You see, I took it the other way. I thought it was basically Jason's mother watching them. I didn't take it as them hearing anybody crying out for help or anything like that or screaming. I just took it as the fact that it was Jason's mother watching them. That's how I always pictured it. But that's actually a good call, though. I didn't think of it in that kind of
That's
way.
that's an interesting perspective, and I'll have to go back and rewatch it. Because one thing I did notice when I was doing my research after this was that this film, um, they said the first one was where they introduced the iconic hockey mask of Jason in this film, but I don't remember seeing it when I
No,
watched
not
it. So, when I read that, I'm like, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch and see if I can find that and spot it, because it's supposed to appear in there somewhere.
Really? Because I don't think it's in this one. I think it's in the second one because in the second one, that's where we wind up seeing the hockey mask being played out because of the fact that he has a bag over his head.
That's
I
what I
believe.
thought too. It came out in the second one because that's when you really,
Right. It's not
where
going to be.
he's introduced. But in my reviews that I read, doing my research, it said that the hockey mask is in there, but I haven't seen it. I'm gonna be honest, I did not see it at all.
Me either. And I've seen this movie a bunch of times, even recent, even to whenever I was watching it today, I didn't even notice it. So now this is like so small that we can't see it unless it's going to be where the camp counselors got killed at
I don't know.
the very
Maybe.
beginning. I don't know, but
Definitely
still,
something to go back and look for. Because if it is in
definitely.
there, I'd like now. I want to see it. You can't tell. I'm the type of person you can't tell me there's candy and don't tell me not to touch it. I'm
Right,
gonna want to
exactly.
touch.
But okay, speaking of touching candy in a sense, but this is actually someone shooting an arrow. But as Brenda Jones is trying to set up an archery range, suddenly an arrow is shot up next to her. She discovered that it was Ned trying to fool around. What did you think of this scene? Because I thought it was a kind of a douchebag type of thing for him to do. And I
Okay,
remember,
so Brenda, played by Laurie Bartram, she
mhm,
did a good job of her reaction, but I honestly, like you said, it was a douchebag move. I probably would have whooped his ass. That
yeah, he was a total
that
ball
had
bag in
me
that.
that had me on the edge of my seat when I first seen that. I'm like, I wouldn't ever talk to that person again. I would whoop them and just
And it
I'd be
doesn't matter how close of friends we are. I don't care. You almost
yeah,
try to fucking kill me. I'm gonna go on ahead and go after you for doing what you
right.
did.
That's not cool. And that, and then he thought it was funny.
Right. And I thought to myself, I want whoever is killing anybody, this would be the person, this is the punch bowl face. This is the person that you would want killed
Right. In
first.
the movie.
Right, in the movie. So that's what I got out of it though too, because it establishes the one ball bag of the group that is basically just a douchebag, and you want him killed. So this would be the guy for me that I would want killed in the movie. You know, um,
He's like, I don't know if I'm gonna go back to way childhood. Um, we had Scooby Doo and then the pup named Scooby Doo, and Freddie Jones was always saying, "It's red herring." So to me, he was the red herring. Like, he's the one that needs to go, you know. But yeah, he definitely did not become my favorite character after that move.
me either. He was the unlikable character. Now the person that's running the camp, to me, he's the one that is more likable because of the fact that he's trying to be understanding towards the final girl to the point where she's kind of shy, kind of timid, kind of woman, and she's like, "Look, if you don't feel comfortable being here and everything, in a couple of days or whatever, I'll go on ahead. We'll go. I'll take you and we'll leave." So he was trying to be a little bit sympathetic to her needs and wants. So I definitely have more respect for him. And I also thought to myself for this, well, Pamela, if you want to go on ahead and kill anybody for opening up this camp, just kill him
Right. Sign
because
him up.
he's right. Just kill him, and guess what? No camp. These kids don't have any money to open this camp up or anything. So all you have to do is just kill him, and that's it. But then again, it'll be the end of the movie. But that's how I saw it.
I wonder
But
how much money they had to offer um the character that had to wear the speedos.
oh my god, that was
My
bad.
my 14-year-old daughter walked in on that scene and she said, "Mom." And I'm like, "I'm sorry." Like, this is a Thrasher movie. I wasn't expecting that either, but yeah, the speedo scene, I hope he got paid well for that.
Me too, because that dude does not belong in no speedo. I was expecting that more out of Kevin Bacon than I would that guy, to be honest with you.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, the counselors also decide to swim at the lake. They are setting up the rafts as Alice and Bill are lying next to the lake. As the counselors are swimming in the lake, Brenda notices something strange in the face and facing them in the woods. We talked about that where we established that we thought that number one, it was either Pamela or maybe Annie being chased and being killed. Marcy was worried, but Brenda was saying that it was probably nothing. Later on, when they were all playing, they noticed that something is wrong with Ned. They notice that he is drowning. Brenda and Jack run to the lake to rescue Ned. They get him up to the raft as Brenda is trying to perform a resurrection. Ned that kisses Brenda as it was a prank. So they wind up trying to do CPR on him, and then he winds up pranking it to kiss Brenda. So
yeah, that was like another douchebag move, but it's to be expected by young adults, I guess we should say. I definitely don't like if I was in that position, I would not want a guy to either shoot an arrow at me or pretend he's drowning.
that's here's the thing. The movie that comes to my mind when somebody's faking that would be Squints from Sandlot.
Squints from the Sandlot, yes, with Peppercorn. What was her first name?
Sandy Peppercorn. And that would be the only time that I would say that you can get away with that because he's like a little kid who's trying to experience life and things like that too. But to see these grown men try to pull something like that, it's definitely a ball bag move.
Squints was a young adolescent, so that was epic. But to have an adult do it or a young adult do it, that's just like, come on, you know better.
Right. But then again, hormones are all over the place. So therefore, he's like, well, I'm going to try and get with Brenda. So I'm going to go ahead and get her to practice CPR on me.
When he first did that scene and was faking, at first I thought maybe it was Jason pulling him down by his foot. And then he did that move to where he was just doing it to prank, to flirt. And, kind of corny, but it just, I swam in Lake Seneca. And when I was swimming, I was 17 when I was swimming in Lake Seneca, and I had a fish go under my foot and touch me, and it felt as big as a human. So at that part, that instant replay of when I was 17 in Lake Seneca up in New York at the Italian Festival, swimming in that lake, I never got back in that lake ever again.
I don't blame you. I wouldn't be getting back in that lake either if I felt something touch me that didn't feel natural or anything either. But that was a good play on your part, though, for thinking it was Jason pulling him down, because I was thinking it was probably the mother. But then again, you don't know who the killer is. Here's the thing. When I first seen this movie, I didn't know who the killer was, so I was thinking it was actually the killer. And then, so that was my initial thoughts. But then you think that, okay, maybe it was actually the mother, because when you rewatch it, you forget a few things or whatever. You're thinking that maybe it might be the mother doing that. But then it was just him being a total douchebag instead.
I didn't even think of it as it could have been the mother at first. But
then again, she'll be waiting there for a long ass time to try to do something. Right. So it also doesn't make sense. But still, horror movies, slasher movies don't need to make sense to make something work either. So, it's just my imagination going off the deep end, no pun intended, whenever it comes down to the thinking that it was Pamela trying to kill the kid, kill him. But, okay, so as Ned is fooling around, they get a visit from Officer Dorff, who is searching for Ralph. Brenda says that they never saw anyone that entered the camp. Jack notices Officer Dorff's motorcycle, as the officer denied to let him on. Officer Dorff then gets a call from the station and leaves the camp. The way he leaves the camp is hilarious to me. Instead of him just pulling the motorcycle around, he goes on ahead, goes all the way at the end of the road, just about, turns his ass back around, and then floors it. And I just thought it was hilarious to show some intimidation It's like, I am the law of this little small
Right.
town. What about for
And
you?
it's hard to take him serious with his name being that.
Officer Dwarf. Yeah.
You know, and
So
maybe that's where he got his big character from. Like, I have to show you I'm the law because you can't take me serious by my name.
that's true. That's actually a good call on that. I didn't think about that. But yeah, as Alice sets up the kitchen dinner for Marcy and Ned, she opens the pantry. Ralph approaches from the pantry. Ralph says, I'm the messenger of God. You're doomed if you stay here. This is a place that's cursed. Cursed. It's got a death curse. As he runs out of the cabin to the bicycle, Alice looks at him and says, You're doomed. You're all doomed. The exorcist says, I think we just met Ralph.
Ralph is a funny character to me, and I've seen a lot of memes with him. But he definitely was a funny character because he's trying to be serious, and a lot of people take him as a crazy old man.
And I think that's how we as the audience takes him though too. It's just a crazy old man in this crazy town. Because every small town has a crazy person that they all know. We all know a rat,
Right.
for example. So I think that we as an audience is also taking him not seriously either, just like how these kids are, because to us, he's hilarious because of the fact he just pops out of the pantry and they think that he's wacko out of his mind. So, I think that's actually a good perception when you think about it in that kind of terms, where we as an audience is taking him not so seriously, just as they are not taking him so seriously. But this is also the part where I told you about with Annie, where they were like, okay, well, is everybody here? Oh, yeah. All except that girl, Annie. She hasn't come yet. So this was the scene that I was talking about.
Right.
So a storm is approaching as the sun goes down. When Jack and Marcy are walking along the lake, Ned is getting jealous and walking another way. He then notices someone that is dressed with black slacks, brown plaid shirt, and a glass ring. That person was standing outside Ned and Marcy's cabin. As Ned approaches, that person he asks, Can I help you? And he goes into the cabin. So what did you think of that one?
That was just creepy.
Yeah.
Like, I would have had a little bit more concern, but at the same time, I don't think I would have wanted to approach them alone.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to approach them alone either, to be honest with you. I thought it was a lot.
Ned didn't really seem to be too bothered by it, though, and I would have been more concerned.
I would have been too, especially when you're in this area with these kids and you're wondering who the hell is this?
I would have definitely asked questions.
Yeah. Then after that, you have Marcy, who talks about a dream that she had many times, saying that in the dream it was raining very hard and the rain turned into blood. When she was done with that story, the thunder and lightning was getting worse. Jack says, it is going to rain like a son of a gun. And they get into their cabin as they went into the cabin. And they started to have sex in a bunk bed, unaware that Ned's body is in the bunk above them as his throat is slit. So now we know. Yeah.
How do they not notice that, though? Like, if you think on average bunk beds or at camp, especially at their age, they would have been tall enough to see it.
Well, not only that, though, if you, Heidi, but if you think of it like this, those bunk beds also kind of sink in when somebody's laying on them.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, because these were old rusted bunk beds. These were not brand new bunk beds. Because even whenever you had that incident with the snake and everything too, where they get the machete and they cut off the snake's head, for example, those were some old beds. That was some old furniture that was being thrown around. So these are bunk beds that would easily be sunk in when somebody's laying down. So they wouldn't even have enough room to even fool around or do anything with because of the fact that there's a body up above them.
Yeah, so wouldn't they notice, like, if they're on the bottom bunk?
That's what I would think.
Especially with dead weight.
Exactly. But I guess when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't pay attention to dead bodies. I don't know. But... or notice if there's anybody up above you. even though there
Right.
wouldn't be enough room to even do anything to that stature. But I like how the lightning emulates his face to show that he's dead and everything, and it's that creepiness of the storm itself that is very unsettled that I really like about this. I like how dark this film is, if that makes
It
any
really
sense.
is. And that was one of the things that the critics didn't figure out was that even though, like I was saying about Gene Siskel found it appalling, the critics didn't figure out that the whole point of the movie was of the violence and trashiness. That was the point. They wanted it to have that trashy, violent feel to it.
Well, this is what I'm thinking, okay? Number one, this is an abandoned camp that they're trying to get back up and running again. There's no lights really anywhere around them other than the flashlights. So of course it's going to be dark, and there's no lights other than and what's inside the cabins. So I like the fact that it's dark like that because it's actually it makes sense for it to be dark.
Right, absolutely. Like it's considering it's such a gloomy, negative area because of what has happened in the past. You know, that it sets the mood of the darkness. And uh but first thing, if you're trying to get an abandoned camp up and running, which is actually the camp really is to this day a Boy Scout camp. In real life, it is a Boy Scout camp. But the last thing I would want to do as a camp counselor or the person in charge of the camp is have a bunch of horny teenagers as my counselors.
You're right about that. I wouldn't want no horny teens as my camp counselors or anything like that because they don't care about that. All they care about is like basically a paycheck and that's it. They don't care
That
about
is
these kids
it.
or anything. You know? You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely do. I definitely agree with you on that. But another thing too is I think that when we actually see this part being played out though too, while Marcy is using the bathroom, she hears the door creaking as it's opening. Marcy suspects that it's Jack. She leaves the bathroom, washing her hands. Marcy is staring at her mirror, talking to herself. She hears a little noise from the shower room. She thinks it's the counselors pulling a prank on her. As Marcy approaches the shower, she opens. The shower blinds and thinks that it's only her imagination. Then from the shadow, an axe is raised. As Marcy turns around, the axe is slammed on Marcy's head. This scene always gets me, though, because it's so unexpected. And you know that you're expecting a jump scare, but you're not expecting it to happen so quickly.
Right.
Because usually after, when somebody checks the bathroom stall or whatever, they give the character enough time to basically turn around and basically walk into another part of the section or something like that. But with this one, he quickly turns around and then bam, there's an axe. And I like how Marcy's like, oh, it's my imagination. Then bam, there's the
And
axe
then
to the
no
head.
response time at all. Like
No. And I thought that was actually a nice kill that they actually set up. I didn't think it was forced. I didn't think there was like a cheap jump scare. I think that we actually got what we wanted out of that scene.
that's they nailed that one. They definitely did with that scene. The other one, as we're coming along, is the arrow, but I think the bathroom scene and the arrow scene were the top two.
Yeah. Because I think that the arrow scene is probably hands down one of my favorite death scenes, aside from the axe. But yeah, while Marcy is using the bathroom, she hears okay. So in Alice's cabin, Brenda becomes bored with nothing to do, and with the help of weed and beer, decides Bill and Alice should play strip Monopoly with her to pass the time. When when the savage storm blows the door open halfway through the game, Brenda realizes her cabin windows are open and heads out to shut it. Calling it a night, As Brenda gets ready for bed and curls up with a book, a childlike voice calls out to her from the storm. Unsure if it is another person or a serious call for help, Brenda gives in and heads outside into the rain. The outdoor lights come up, revealing she has been walked into the archery range. Blinded by the light, she is trapped by the killer and dies off screen. So
I was
I like that.
I like that, but I was a little bummed that she was killed off screen. Not that I really wanted to be pro-violence, but the fact is it's a slasher movie, so they took more of a classic approach to her death.
Right, to make us wonder, okay, did she die or what's going on here, right?
Because is she hurt? Is she going to pop up later with injuries? So it was more of a suspenseful kind of touch to it.
Kind of like an Alfred Hitchcock kind of feel to it, in a sense, because of the way that they did it. You know?
Yeah, I agree to that.
Yeah, because I think that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to basically save some time, probably with the other death scene, because they're like, well, we already had 2 death scenes already, so why don't we just go ahead and save her for later on when the big climax happens?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that people will wonder what happened to her. But then at that time, though, people forget who she is. Nobody remembers anything about her. So at the same time, though, it doesn't really work. You know?
So do you think, in your opinion, that was a fail? Or do you think it was
I feel like more than anything, it feels like a missed opportunity to be able to, because here's the thing, we already established these characters.
Right.
So to see her being pulled in that kind of way, I feel like that we should have been earned that right to see her death.
Yeah.
Because I just think it was a missed opportunity.
I agree with that. Like I said, I think it would have made more sense to see her death. But in perspective, I feel that it was done the way it was done to create the suspense.
I think so too. It was to create and emulate the suspense of it as well. So, but I don't really feel the suspense of it, to be honest with you. I just feel like it's a waste of a missed opportunity because nobody remembers her or anything until she actually goes through the window and it's like, oh, there she is.
So thanks for coming up.
Right?
Next time, use the door.
Exactly. Just don't come through the window next time. Just use the door like a normal person. How rude.
Dead person.
Exactly. But yeah,
everybody uses the door when they're the dead person.
Exactly. And then when Bill returns to Alice's cabin after a quick adventure outside, Alice tells him she heard a scream. Certain it was Brenda's. The two of them head out to Brenda's cabin, where they find a bloody axe, the same one used to kill Marcy, tucked away in Brenda's bed. Searching Jack and Marcy's cabin and then the bathrooms, Alice and Bill find no one around, and they start to suspect it isn't a setup or a prank. It is actually something serious. So Bill tries to keep Alice calm by suggesting otherwise. The two break into Steve's office and find the phone lines have been cut. They try to take Jack's car to town, but it won't start. With a 20-mile walk through a pitch-black forest and the pouring rain out of the question, the two give up and decide to wait at the main lodge for Steve to come back.
Isn't it ironic that the phone lines are cut and the car won't start?
Exactly. At this point, they should know already that this is not a prank and stuff like that too, even though they found the axe. But come on, you have two major things that happen. The phone lines are down. It's not because there's a storm, but that does not excuse the reason why that the battery that something's happening to the car as well. Either. So yeah, you have 2 for 2 on that. You know?
Do you think if they were a little bit smarter and played it out, Now, I know this was a movie and created a certain way, but if they were normal teenagers today and they were smart and played it out and decided to all stay together in one room.
I think it leaves it open to the fact that all of them would probably have been dead. You know,
Or
because there's a
do you think
hint
the
of
killer
struggle.
would kill them all at once, or do you think that he would try to weed them out one on one, like they did in the movie?
I think that he would actually try to manipulate them at their weakness and find some way to draw them out of the cabin because they all can't be there. For example, you can cut the lights off. You can do X amount of other stuff, break the windows,
I mean, at some
or
point,
set the cabin on
have to
fire.
go to the bathroom,
Right, or set the cabin on fire
right?
because it's wood. So that's another thing that could have happened. But yeah, then meanwhile, Steve finishes his meal at the local diner, knowing that they are new to the camp and not as skilled as he is. Steve decides to head back to the camp, Crystal Lake, to check on them. Instead of waiting out the storm in town, partway down the road, Steve's Jeep gets stuck in the mud. And because of the heavy load of supplies he's hauling, he can't get out. A passing policeman offers him a ride back to camp, but gets a report of a serious accident in town and is forced to drop him off as close as he can. As Steve walks the rest of the way back, he is stopped by a flashlight at the Camp Crystal Lake sign, apparently recognizing the person. Steve asks what they are doing out in this mess of a storm. The killer then stabs him with a knife. So I thought Steve's death was a little anticlimactic in a sense because it wasn't no lead up to it. It was like one of those first person view type of things again, and that mystery element of we don't know who this killer is and things like that too, other than the fact that Steve knows this person, but that's about it. That's the only context that we have with this.
Do you
His
think
death was not as good.
Okay, so Steve is a funny character. Before I realized that it wasn't Jason and it wasn't his mother, I originally first thought, when the first time watching this, that it could have been Steve.
It's true.
And then you realize it's not Steve and that he knows the killer. So I'm wondering, like in the past story or history, if there was one to be created. Not that there is, but if there was one to be created, I wonder if Steve knew the killer back when the time, like, was he a young boy at the time? Was he at the... Hold on
But
a
I'm
second.
thinking
Mute me.
that, but I think that, but yeah, I think at that time though, I want to say that he knew her because of the fact that she wound up saying that he's friends with the Christies. So, and I think he was actually one of the Christies, if I'm not mistaken. I'm thinking that's how he knew her, was because of the fact that he was friends with the Christies, and I think that's why. What about
Oh,
you?
yeah, that's right. I remember that part now. So, yeah,
And
but like I said, at first, you know how, like, when you first watch a movie for the first time and you kind of form your own opinion of who the killer is. Now, we all know, Friday the 13th is iconic for Jason Voorhees, but if you have never watched it and didn't know who Jason was, that it kind of points like a picture that it could have been Steve, or, anybody, the truck driver,
mhm.
anybody, like it could
Anybody
have,
could have came back, right?
anybody could have came back to be the killer.
Right, even the crazy guy too in the small town too. He could crazy Ralph.
Ralph.
If anybody that would be suspect, it would be Ralph. You
Absolutely.
know,
He knew too
but
much.
I want to circle back for a minute because we did miss out on one thing. Marcy said, "Here's the thing: So, you know how we were talking about the sex scene and stuff like that, about how Jack and Marcy didn't recognize that anybody was on top? Well,
Right.
Marcy said afterwards that she has to go use the bathroom, leaving Jack unaware that the killer is in the same cabin and under Jack's bed the entire time. After Marcy left, Jack is grabbed a cigarette. A drip of blood dropped on his forehead. The killer has grabbed Jack's forehead, ramming an arrow through the bed, piercing his throat. So that was the scene that we forgot to even talk about. So I wanted to go back to that real quick.
I did elaborate a little bit on being one of the epic scenes, and you know, Jack, of course, being played by Kevin Bacon. What a iconic way to die.
That if I would go out with a bang or an arrow through my throat, I think I would actually have that as my most clever kill. Because nobody would have actually thought of using an arrow and doing it through the bed like that, you know?
Imagine the force that took to even put it through. Like,
exactly. That is just something that person is very strong, and I don't even want to mess with them. That's how I feel about that person because of how strong they are to actually jam an arrow through the bed. And plus, the bed is also kind of dingy though too, because it's not a very strong bed. That person probably just had the arrow underneath there the whole time. It was like, okay, I'll just wait until he lays back down and then just let the arrow work its way underneath the mattress and do it that way, you know? But arriving back at the camp, the killer goes to the power generation cabin and disables it, forcing Bill to go out and investigate. He insists Alice stay in the cabin rather than follow. When Bill does not return, Alice becomes concerned again and heads out to the generator cabin to look for him. Not finding him in the small cabin, she closes the front door and she finds his body pinned to the door by several arrows. Now alone, terrified, and knowing that something is killing her friends, Alice flees back to the main cabin and tries to barricade herself in. After a few minutes of silence, Brenda's corpse is hurled through the window. Hey, Brenda. I thought this was an interesting time to actually throw somebody through a window and have all these people showing up that we were introduced to, and now they're dead, and we're having the same reaction that she's having now.
Right.
Alice. And you know, I thought that was something that was just crazy. Then all of a sudden she goes outside the cabin and stuff like that too. But well, let's talk about that. Alice hears a vehicle outside of the cabin and thinking it was Steve. And she runs out to join him and try to escape. Instead, she finds a middle-aged woman who introduces herself as Mrs. Voorhees. Mrs. Voorhees explains that she is an old friend of the Christies. Alice hysterical warns her away. She insists on going inside to check after being told about the deaths. Mrs. Voorhees expresses horror and sadness at the sight of Brenda's body, because this is actually the part that we were talking about at the very beginning. Was like, oh, what happened, my dear? What happened? Show me. And then you wind up seeing that being played out, where she's trying to be caring and being very charismatic towards her, and then all of a sudden that switch is just turned on to the fact that she gives her this whole entire backstory of everything that happened at this camp, and starts criticizing, and then she starts criticizing Steve for trying to open the camp after all that had happened, calling the camp cursed. Mrs. Voorhees tells Alice that her and Jason died, that her son Jason died at the camp in 1957. Mrs. Voorhees goes on a tangent describing how she was the camp counselor's cook, and now Jason, who wasn't a good swimmer, had drowned in the lake when the counselors left the children, and her Jason, unsupervised, to go off and have sex. I'm telling Alice that June 13th, a Friday, is her son's birthday. She switches between talking to herself and shouting at Alice, accusing her personally of killing her son. Mrs. Voorhees pulls out a hunting knife, the same one she used to kill several of Alice's friends, the class ring on her left hand. removes all doubt that Mrs. Voorhees is the killer. A lengthy chase ensues, during which Alice flees her attack and finds Annie's body in Mrs. Voorhees' Jeep and Steve's body hanging upside down outside.
Well, Steve kind of deserved that. But isn't it cliche to say that Mrs. Voorhees was the old cook at the camp during the time that the year that Jason drowned, and the first one that gets killed is the replacement cook.
Right, because if you think of it like this, it's like as if she's like, oh, so she's the one who's replacing me when I was the original camp counselor cook. Sorry, but no one's replacing me. I'm going to go ahead and kill you for replacing me. So therefore, you have motivation now that she's pissed off because she's now took that position from her, even though the camp's been closed down for X amount of years.
Right.
I didn't think of it like that until now.
That's what I said. Like, when you really dig deep into it, it's very deep. It's as deep as the lake.
It definitely is. And, and then you actually see echoes through her mind of Jason calling for his mom to help him. And but instead it's like, kill her, mommy. Kill her. Kill her. Okay, Jason. Okay. I'll kill him. Kill them. And so, yeah, it's like a revenge story for the job now that she once had. And now that job is diminished because this person had the job. And seeing Annie inside that Jeep, I'm like, you mean to tell me she's been running around in this Jeep with this dead person the whole entire time? So that's insane.
Definitely. So it tells you who was driving the Jeep in the beginning.
Yep, it sure does. But what
it tells you without telling you.
Exactly. My question is this. So when you see the Jeep pull up to that house, what was your first initial thoughts? Did you think, oh, yeah, she's about to be saved, or you think that this could be the killer?
Well, when the Jeep first pulled up to the house, I was thinking it was the same Jeep that picked up Annie. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, no, it wouldn't have been a woman killer, because then you see this nice, kind mom, that seems very nurturing. And then, that psycho music in her head goes off, and she has that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type moment. So, you almost know something's going to happen without knowing.
That's true.
At that moment.
And I like how this is actually the climax and everything too, because now you have all the bodies piling up. Now knowing that Alice is no longer safe in this place now, and she has nobody to go to. So I definitely like that aspect to it. Then you have Mrs. Voorhees heads back into the generator room to turn the power back on before continuing to chase. She corners Alice in a storage shed where Alice finds a shotgun, but the ammunition drawer is chained and locked. Before Alice can load it, Mrs. Voorhees attacks her and slaps her around. Alice escapes and runs back to the main cabin, hiding behind a locked door in a pantry. Mrs. Voorhees breaks the door open and rushes in at Alice. Brandishing a machete, Alice hits her on the side of the head and with a frying pan knocks her out. Alice sits by the lakeside, hoping that all is over, but Mrs. Voorhees rushes out of the darkness at her with the machete. Narrowly avoiding the machete, Alice knocks it out of her hand with a paddle, and the two wrestle by the lake. And
can we talk about when they're wrestling inside the cabin part there?
Yeah,
and Pamela Voorhees bites Alice in her wrist.
I didn't even see that part. I didn't even notice that. She bites her?
She bites her. She bites her on the wrist.
Damn. that is so funny though.
It reminded me of, okay, so my older kids are 24 and 21, but I remember one time when they were younger, they were wrestling they were mad, but they were wrestling to get out their anger. And I didn't yell at them. I just kind of left them. I was a young mother, so I left them work it out. I didn't want to split it up. They had to learn to work it out. And I remember my oldest, who she is now 24 and my son is 21. And she bit my son in his big toe because my son had more strength, even though he was younger. He had more strength. So her way of getting him to let go, she bit him in his big toe. So when I seen that move where she bit Alice on the wrist, I instantly thought of my kids. Like, definitely Alice had the upper hand of a little bit more strength, and maybe in her mind she was trying to, get her to loosen her grip, right, to get the upper hand. Definitely when you go back, watch that. You'll catch it. It's really quick, but you'll catch it. She'll bite her in the wrist.
Okay, I will. I'll do that because I didn't notice that she bit her. That's something that I never noticed in the movie. But that's just an iconic fight between the two of them, and of course, that famous machete scene. And then she holds up the paddle for the canoe, and then you all of a sudden see Pamela. Pamela goes on ahead and just slices the canoe paddle with the machete like it was nothing, and then you see them basically struggling, and it was just an automatically brawl out of who will survive this fight.
It definitely was the battle of the survival battle, for sure.
I love the battle. This is hands down one of my favorite battles when it comes down to slashers or horror movies. But yeah, then you have this. And then of course, when Alice grabs the machete and decapitates Mrs. Voorhees in one stroke, and shock, Alice gets in the canoe and hands paddles out of the middle of the lake where she falls asleep. Now, the scene that I always like this scene where she basically decapitates her with the machete, and then you see the hands going like this,
and the little blood come out.
Yeah, I always like that little subtleness of it, and then the body just automatically has that one little small reaction, and then it falls down.
It was definitely an iconic decapitation.
Definitely. So
that's what my thought of what that is. And in the Friday the 13th series that they had going on, let me see, one of the guy that made the special effects designer, Tom Savini, he made several sculptures of Jason to do dying, to kill him off, but then they never ended up using it to keep him ongoing. Like, they put a machete in the face. They did a scene for Jason to be decapitated just like his mother. So, but they never did it to... Whoops.
But you know what else, though, too, is Tom Savini also worked with George Romero, who did the, who ended up making, like, Night of the Living Dead and things like that, too.
Right.
But, yeah. But I think also, too, the reason why they didn't want to decapitate Jason is because they wanted to build up on a franchise, especially with the ending that we're about to talk about. But... the morning comes and Alice is still asleep in the canoes. Police arrive and call out to her, and she awakens as she sits up in the contemplance of her rescue. The decomposing corpse of Pamela's son, Jason, attacks Alice and pulls her, screaming hysterically, out of the canoe. As she is dragged underwater, she awakens in a hospital. When she asks about Jason, the police inform her that they never found the body inside the lake. Alice then whispers, "And he's still there."
Iconically.
Yeah.
He's still there.
But that's how you know that they were trying to build up on a sequel, because they have now Jason, and now you have people that are like, okay, who is now, what's going to happen with the Jason storyline now?
Right, exactly. And it gave it a suspenseful ending, like, you know, what's going to happen to Alice later mentally, which they bring her back in the next one. Um, and also, how do they handle the camp? It left it on suspense. What about that body in the lake? She tells the police, the boy pulled me under, and
Well, also too,
or out
we're
the
also
boat.
wondering as an audience though too, did she dream it? Is it just one of those things that she went through a lot of hell the night and she just had this nightmarish dream about this kid that just popped out of the water? So it has that supernatural feel to it. Is it like, is it
Yeah,
real
that's
or is it just fantasy?
right. Exactly. Like, is it something in her mind? Did it really happen? Did she dream it because Pamela was told her in the beginning when she was nice, that her
Of the
son had
story.
died, the whole story about it. So was this in her head because of that?
So it goes into like a little bit of it goes from a slasher film to the very end to where it becomes like a psychological thriller in a sense at the end of it.
I took a course in psychology in college when I went to Argosy University. And what I liked about this movie is I could pick at the characters a little bit and kind of try to analyze maybe where their thoughts could have been. And like you said with Alice, her thoughts, it's kind of a psychological um, hallucination when she's in the hospital. And it could have been caused from the trauma of what she went through with Pamela. And then, just with everything else that kind of falls into place, Pamela's trauma of losing her son. And it just having that key to be able to kind of pick at it in my own mind as I'm
Right.
watching made it a little bit more suspenseful. So, you're not going to catch some of these just watching it one time around. It's definitely one that you pick out more little pieces that make more sense the more you watch it.
Right. And that's one thing I can say about this movie too, though, is it has that rewatchable kind of flavor to it and everything too, because it's not one of those movies that you don't have to want and done kind of thing. You can watch it again and get something else out of it. Like for instance, with like you said, the wrist scene where basically that battle between Alice and also Jason's mom and stuff like that. That little scene, and then of course wondering if this is actually a psychological thing that's going on with Alice as well. But I also like how the music is played like a dream sequence though
Yes.
too.
So do you think that's how they came up with like Jason's music, that like this right here? It's almost, if you think about it, that they play.
Well, did you know
Um,
that's also translated?
I didn't mean to do that.
It's okay.
Um,
But that's also translated to kill, 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 kill
yes.
as well.
So they have it in like a dreamlike sense.
So another thing though, like we were actually talking about like the dream sequence and things like that too, because it does feel like a dream. This thing does definitely feel like a dream type of feel to it because of the way that they're trying to set it up. But I like that whole entire aspect that with the music that you mentioned with the kill, 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 kill. It's kind of like Jason's whole entire thing echoing in his head, just like how
Right.
Pamela's voice is echoing in her head as well.
See, and I used to struggle from seizures. And when some people with having seizures, they get these little auras. And it's almost like it's set up like an aura. Like when some people get auras, they hear distorted voices,
Mhm.
or like a noise or a high pitched ringing in their ear. So that kill, 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 is almost like an aura setting.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think of how to actually your subconscious, I think is what I'm
Yes.
looking at. But yeah, that's the word I was looking for. But yeah, all in all, though, I think this is a great slasher film for how to get started with Halloween and things like that too. And also too, I remember every Friday the 13th they used to play they used to have a Friday the 13th marathon on.
Marathon, yes.
Yep.
Yep. And could you imagine them making all the Friday the 13th with the equipment and the effects that they have now compared to
Here's the
that
thing.
1980s? Like the 1980s version is iconic because it's the original, and I am big on the original. But could you imagine the suspense we got suspense from that? So if we had what we have now back then, just imagine how much successful this would be. And considering that a lot of the people, like I was saying, Gene Siskel and some of the other critics wanted this movie to bomb. They wanted it to flop. And Gene wrote, I hope I've ruined the Friday the 13th, which is the latest film by one of the most despicable creatures ever to infest the movie business. If any film should be X-rated on the basics of violence, this is it. And guess what? It didn't. It's actually one of the most iconic things that you remember at Halloween.
Right. Not only that, but okay, for them to say that, this is the most X-rated thing. There's no boobs in this thing. There's hardly, there's blood, but it's not like an oversaturation of blood either.
It's not gory,
No.
as what is out now. Honestly,
or any other film in the 80s, though, too.
The most X-rated part of that movie was the Speedo scene.
That I do agree with.
That's the most X-rated part that, I could honestly think of.
Like, this movie
yes, they were killing, but I mean, enough to give you nightmares.
No. And also, too, this is also on a budget of $550,000. And it made $59.8 million at the box office. So that's very impressive for a film that's low budget, considering low budget at that time.
Yeah, that's still a lot of money for low budget films.
Yeah. So I think that's everything that we wanted to talk about as far as Friday the 13th goes. I definitely recommend you guys check it out when you guys can, just to revisit it. This is a fun rewatch. I definitely had some let me think of the word, nostalgia going into it and rewatching it again, and also learning a little bit of something new that I haven't seen either. So I was very entertained with it. It's also streaming on Max right now, so go ahead and check it out on Max, Heidi's YouTube channel and podcast and stuff like that. And it's just a wonderful podcast and stuff like that within the community itself. So check that out when you guys can. Always until next time. Thank you again, Heidi, for joining me. And always until next time, guys.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for wanting to come on here. I do appreciate you every single time. It's always great to have you on here. So, guys, go ahead, follow her. All the links are going to be in the show notes below. And always until next time.